Thank you all for coming. Then we're going to talk about the initiatives in local governments and how we can encourage them, and especially how it happens. So please, Florian, I would like you to start by talking to us about the LiMux project and presenting us the LiMux project.
Yes, thank you. My name is Florian Schießl. I'm the Deputy Project Leader of our LiMux project. And what are we doing in Munich? Of course, everyone knows, I think, that we're switching to free software. Yes, that was one of the decisions our city council decided in 2003, and it spread around the world, the news. And yes, we are doing it. We are facing many challenges. We have many problems to solve, not only technical problems, but many organizational problems. We are managing a migration to 14,000 Linux desktops using a Debian-based operating system and OpenOffice for Office Suite. We are integrating these clients into our infrastructure. We are integrating the business applications every public administration needs. And the applications you can't buy in the market, you have to develop or let develop for you by someone. And of course, we have to train our users and to do an office migration. And that's the main part of Munich's LiMux project.
Thank you. Pim, would you please present us the NOIV program, the Netherlands in Open Connection?
Okay, thank you. The Netherlands in Open Connection is a government program focused on open standards and open source implementation in the Netherlands. It was initiated by the Parliament in 2008. We are 1 year on the road now. There are a couple of new policies in the Netherlands that we have to implement. The first is being that in the case that you have a separate that you have two kinds of software, closed source or open source. If the quality is equal, government bodies should choose open source software. And the second, I think most important, is that for open standards, we have a comply or explain principle. We have a list of open standards that is monitored by a forum standardization. And if you are going to implement new software or change old software, it needs to comply to open standards. If you cannot comply, you have to explain why you can't.
Okay, seems pretty good. Mr. De Vriendt, could you please present us IDABC and tell us what you do about free software, open standards and interoperability?
Okay, my name is Karel de Vriendt. I'm working for the European Commission in the IT department of the European Commission. First, a disclaimer. I'm entitled to speak about the program. I'm responsible for the IDABC program, but I'm not an official spokesman of the Commission. So don't come with questions on general policies, software patents and all these type of things, because I'm afraid I'm not responsible for this type of things. The IDABC program is a program that is about interoperability between public administrations. It's about interlinking systems made by public administrations. As part of the activities, we put a lot of emphasis on open standards, as we believe open standards is the basis of interoperability, and we follow up developments on open source and the use of open source in public administrations, which we regularly report on via the Open Source Observatory and Repository, the OSO.
Thank you. With your uppermost position, would you say that with the global view that you have over Europe, would you say that the local governments in Europe have adopted free software or are going to adopt free software? And is the interoperability framework being implemented?
Okay, I wouldn't call me for my upper view, but okay, that's one thing. One, of course, there is no European policy via, and there cannot be European policy via which we could impose the use of open software on any administration. Open software has to compete against other software for use in administrations. That's the first thing. That having said, and on the also you can find many use cases, and people like Florian here or the Netherlands show that a lot is happening, all kinds of other things. Mainly, well, the most visible parts are discussions on the desktop. Are we going to use Linux or Windows, OpenOffice or Microsoft Office? This is the most visible, but at the other side also the least interesting part of the introduction of open source software in public administrations. When we go a little bit further, we are speaking about the back office, and then how many organizations are switching their databases, their ERP systems, their human resource systems to open source alternatives. I think very little, and the question is, why should they? Then, of course, and that's where it becomes very interesting, public administrations spend an enormous amount of money on custom software. And there it becomes very interesting, because there we're speaking about software especially written for public administrations and paid by taxpayers' money. There we're trying to encourage people to share the results of that work, to make them available for reuse, and their open source licenses are an interesting model. And then finally, the most interesting part is when administrations start to work together, to solve together their problems and create real custom open source communities. And there are examples of all of them on the OSOR, and in our session today we also speak about it.
Okay, thank you. Pim, do you have any examples to tell us about in the Netherlands, and are the local governments, embracing the program?
It is a difficult situation indeed, because in the Netherlands, most municipalities are using only one vendor for all their systems. So municipality A uses only vendor X, and municipality B uses vendor Y, and it's all closed, and it's very difficult. So that's why we are focusing on open standards first, because if these vendors comply to open standards, it is going to be easier for these municipalities to exchange data within the municipality and with each other and with other government bodies. And that is, I think, the first step. And of course, when you're going to build new custom-built software, it would be very feasible to use open source, of course, because it doesn't really matter if you build new software, if it is closed or open for the government. So you should make it open, indeed. And yes, we have very good examples of implementation of open source and also open standards. In open source, Amsterdam is leading in the Netherlands. They are implementing right now, in the next years, and they already implemented parts of it, an asterisk telephone system. So thousands of users in Amsterdam are moving to an open source telephone system. Also, they have implemented a Linux desktop where they made available over 150 legacy applications on the Linux desktop for users. And that is, I think, a really good example of implementations in the Netherlands.
Okay. Florian, would you tell us what were the reasons why the city of Munich chose free software, and how is it going on?
It's very funny. The only reason why the city of Munich had to choose something else than Microsoft was Microsoft. They told us we couldn't live with the solution we have deployed around the city. That was Microsoft Windows NT in the past. And they told us stopping support, so do something else. And of course they thought, okay, Munich, like every other one in the world, just buys the next licenses, new licenses, and improves on the same product. But it's a legal requirement in Germany, and we took it very serious to examine alternatives, to examine alternatives to some special product. And in the end, there have been three main reasons why we took the free software solution. The first one was independence, increase freedom, not just from one single software vendor, but also from hardware vendors, from consultants, from external timelines, and so on. And this independence followed by more equality in the software market, more opportunities for especially small and medium-sized companies to take part in this market. Let me give you one example. We didn't benefit from this in the past, but last CeBIT trade fair, I walking through the halls, and one Microsoft salesman told the audience, wow, there are about 33,000 certified Microsoft partners in Germany. That's a big economy, and everyone could offer services and products for Microsoft based. I had a talk afterwards, and I told the audience, wow, there are about 80 million potential service and product providers for free software solutions in Germany. So that's exactly the point, I think. Choosing free software and open standards doesn't exclude anyone from the software market. So it was a very strong point for us to choose. And of course, in the end, the third reason was to reduce our IT costs in the long term, because we can decide which concrete solution we want to use. But let me add, the cost argument is, for me, not the most important argument of using free software.
I think we agree. In the Netherlands, that's about the same. The cost is a secondary reason.
Yeah, cost is, of course, interesting in the long term. But even if the costs are equal, the choice for open source and mostly open standards is actually an easy one. We think that we can improve service for citizens and for businesses by using open standards, because we can work faster and more efficient. Because, for instance, in the past, when you moved from city A to city B, your data, like where you live and when you were born, was printed out, sent on a fax to the new city, and that was punched into a new system. Nowadays, you can just do that electronically with an open standard. I think that's an improvement. So yeah, this is one of the motives to using open standards and open source. Another one, I think, is to make the software and the government more open, so that everybody can check what kind of software is being used, how it's being used, etc. And another one is to enable, indeed, more smaller enterprises to join the software market and to participate in making software for the government. And you already see that happening. These open source telephony applications I was talking about, there is another small municipality in the Netherlands where they have implemented it for 5 years already, and it was quite a small company that did this very successfully.
Okay, so it works to foster competition and to improve the access to public markets for the small companies. Do you have the same point of view?
Yes, most of the things have been said by my colleagues much more nicely than I could do. There are two types of arguments you use. One are a number of policy arguments. They are used by policymakers and by politicians. And this is about transparency. This is about competition. This is about innovation. This is about level playing fields, etc. Then there are public administration type of arguments, because as a public administrator you're bound by rules and regulations, and then you speak about avoidance of vendor lock-in, you speak about cost, you speak about efficiency, etc. But you see always the same things coming back. Cost is an issue, for example, in educational systems where money is scarce, it's a very important issue. Control is a very important issue, both policy-wise and public administration-wise. Can we control our own destiny? Can we control access to our own information? Can we control when we do what? that is always coming back. As policy element, the level playing field and the possibility of all companies to compete on the market is very often cited. It's no third party who determines who can provide services to you. So this type of things come always back. And of course, open standards is again, and policy and public administration wise, an evidence.
I think I can add to that, that open standards is most important in removing that vendor lock-in. Because what I just said about municipalities using one vendor mostly, if they have to comply to open standards in the future, if this is implemented right, these municipalities can easily change to another vendor because they're using open standards. And I think that is one of the biggest gains we can make here. Yeah.
Florian, in the city of Munich, what were the main challenges or hindrances that you encountered to implement the LiMux project?
Yes, Munich is a very special city in Germany, you have to know. We are not a centralized IT, but we have 12 different departments. Everyone is running its own IT. So on the first look, there have been many technical challenges. For example, to integrate the base client, a Linux-based client, into the IT infrastructure of every department. For example, to deal with the business applications, legacy applications, to switch over to OpenOffice. But from nowadays, and our project's ongoing for 6 years now, I can tell you, in my opinion, there's no technical hurdle to implement free software open standards. You can solve every technical problem using free software and open standards. Absolutely no problem. But the main point in Munich is that we are doing a change management project, dealing with emotions, with fears of people, which processes change their business processes. So they are not afraid about the software tool they're using, but about the thing that they do something other than the day before. And managing the change, managing the emotions of people is a big challenge in Munich, but it's not related to free software. And the free software problems, the technical problems, I think everything is solvable.
Do you have the same opinion in the concrete implementation of the program? Is the human factor the main hazard?
Not the main factor maybe, but it is very important indeed. You see a lot of fear, uncertainty and doubt in the market about open source, about open standards. I think this is going away quite quickly. If you look back at the past 10 years ago, open source was something for hobby geeks. And now it is something that even the big companies are also implementing. This is a huge change. And we in our program refer to it as a snowball that is already going down the mountain. It is going, it's growing and growing, and it's going faster and faster, and I don't think we can stop that. So yeah, it is it is true that a lot of people are afraid of change, and especially because they don't know about it. So that's why we are also putting a lot of effort in, let's call it public relations. So we are showcasing good examples. We are giving the local government bodies good examples, but also tools. So we give them white papers on which licenses exist, how can you use them. We give them tools on procurement, because that is a huge problem. Mostly they don't know how to write a procurement to have a level playing field for closed or open source software. So we provide them with a standard document they could use, or standard text they could use to do that. And I think that is a good step forward to promote more open source and open standards.
Okay, the issue of procurement in Europe is a big issue, because we know that many local governments don't respect the European rules for public tenders. And how can we improve that? And is a public policy the only way to truly implement the interoperability framework that was set by the European Commission?
Well, first, I'm not in a position to comment on the fact that, on the non-fact that public procurement rules are not always followed in Europe. But, well, yes, I think policies like Netherland open verbinding are a very good and helpful thing, because they put forward, first, that it's possible to do, and that it's not strange to do it. Second, they give a lot of help to guide people. And at the European level, but then without the policy element, we try to do the same with Azor. Because the main problems, as my colleague said, are legacy, inertia. Is it really, well, it's easier not to change than to change. And third, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I sometimes say, when I started in IT in the late 70s, when the saying was, nobody get fired for using IBM. And if you were proposing something else than IBM, you were visited by people in blue suits who came to say that this was a bad decision. And if you standed with the decision, they were visiting your boss to say, they are doing this strange thing, nobody has done it before, it's a big risk. If that doesn't help, they went to their boss, and very often at the end they had their result. The names have changed, it are no longer blue suits, but the practice continues to exist. And there is a lot of inertia and people who say it's better to not to take risks than to take risks. And by providing information on good practices, by providing guidance, you help to do it. But without a clear statement, like in the Netherlands, it will continue a long and difficult fight.
I think I would like to add to that I think it is very important in the procurement process to look at the exit costs. And I think that is a point that we need to stress more. Because the legacy systems they're using now, to get rid of them is extremely expensive. So if they're going to buy new systems, and they have the choice between closed source software or open source software, both of them should make clear what the exit costs are if they want to get rid of it in a couple of years. So, and I think that open source is going to be hugely in favor in that process if they calculate the exit cost in the procurement process.
Florian, do you have anything to add about that?
Yes, that's exactly what we did in the past in our examination, in the pre-study in 2003. We did not only look at the cost factor of the alternatives from proprietary to free software solutions, but also on, we called it standards and IT architecture standards from Munich, and something like investing in a backend infrastructure just to run a simple operating system was a strategic factor to not do this vendor lock-in. Nowadays you call it exit costs. And it was exactly what we did, and many wondered why we did. But nowadays exit costs are a very important point in your examination of what will you do next.
And that was my last question. Exactly. What will you do next? What's the next step now for your program?
Yes, in Munich, end of this year, OpenOffice is on our 14,000 desktops. So many templates are migrated. The link between business applications on the one side, the Office system, and the Office system and the operating system is cut off. That's a great achievement for us. And the next 2 years are the main years for switching the desktops to the free operating system. But that's only the point in Munich, I think. Nowadays, the next step should be, in my opinion, to build up a network, a real community of public administration, like OSA, for example, does, then because we have the opportunity to talk to another and to share experiences, to share solutions, and that's a very new one to all of us, and we should do this, and we all will benefit from this, maybe on the European level, of course on the national level, I think.
So encourage cooperation.
Yes.
Okay. Pim, what's the next step now in the implementation of the program? Is there anything in particular? Going on?
It is going on. The government has written this action plan that started this program, and this program is ending the end of 2011. And for the next 1.5 years, 2 years, we are mostly focusing on implementing open standards and getting good examples from the marketplace, from government bodies, and showcasing these examples and working on the tools for procurement, etc., etc. I don't think we can change the world in just 3-4 years. It is too complicated, it's too big. But we can start, and we can make this snowball going faster and faster, and I think we're doing that. So the next step is up to the politicians, actually. But for now, we are really pushing open standards and open source.
Okay. And Karel, is the IDABC planning to improve or revise the interoperability framework, or is there anything that is coming and that should improve the electronic administration, interoperability in the electronic administration?
Well, first, the IDABC program ends at the end of this year, so IDABC is not going to do much anymore. There is a new program in the meantime decided by the European Council and the European Parliament, the ISA program, Interoperability Solutions for Administrations. And as the title says it, that program starts next year. As the title says it, it's all about interoperability. And very importantly, on the request, explicit request of the member states in the Council and the European Parliament, within the legal decision setting up that program, the principles of openness and reuse have been stated as guiding principles in the implementation of that program. So we have now a legal mandate to promote openness and to promote reuse. So I think that are very important elements. It's the first time ever that clearly it's stated that we should build interoperability on openness and on reuse. So that will give us the possibility to continue with the kind of collaboration and collaborative platforms like we have today, also in the area of open source, but we also have SEMIC in the area of semantic interoperability, and we have e-practice in general sharing of good practice in e-government. So to continue with this type of initiatives and to continue to help member states and administrations at all levels to benefit from what is happening elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. This looks very promising and guiding with good principles. Do you have any final word that you would like to add?
Well, you asked me that already yesterday evening, so I have had a long night to think about it. And there is not one slogan, I think. I think we should look at various elements. For public administrations, like I said, essential is open standards. Much more than open source. Go for open standards. Create the level playing field, both in your architectural decisions and in your public procurement activities. And use the next paradigm shift. We have now a paradigm shift to cloud computing, web computing, which may give us an opportunity to do things without hindrance or with less hindrance of the legacy. For policymakers, I think, well, good practices, look to what the Netherlands are doing, see if that type of things is useful in your constituency. Very important is also that providers of ICT solutions dare to propose open source solutions. And it of course hangs together with the previous things. But now very often you see that they don't do if it's not explicitly required. That's a problem as well. And for the societal groups, I think they should ensure that public administrations act in a transparent way. Public administrations have the obligation to justify their decisions, and they have the obligation to be transparent. So, request them to be it.
Okay, so openness and transparency, mainly. Anything else you would like to add, Florian, Pim?
Yes, it's the same conclusion by me. Let's do it is the last sentence on my slides during talks, because nowadays we are public administrations. We're using the money of our taxpayers, and we have to decide if we invest money in the right to use software or in services and solutions by free software. And on the second step, if we invest in services and solutions around free software, we can give the knowledge, the wisdom, the products back to the community. So twice benefit from just €1 taxpayers' money. And let's do it. We public administrations should decide for free software and open standards, and initiatives like also on European level will help us.
So, public money for public software.
Yes, free software for free people.
Like our Brazilian fellows just told us before. Okay, Pim?
Well, I don't have much to add to these wise words. What I think is most important is the public relations of open source and open standards. That is something we could really make more progress on, because there is still so much FUD in this market, especially in local municipalities. This is a slow-moving market. They are using the same systems for a very long time, and they are used to it, and they don't like to, well, they are a bit uncertain about changing. So I think the marketing of open source and open standards is very important, even in governments. We should help them, educate them, and give them the opportunities to implement these open standards and open source in their ICT.
Okay, thank you all for your very constructive participation, and I think that you enlightened everyone about how we can implement free software and especially open standards in local governments. And thank you for coming. Thank you for enlightening me too. And see you really soon, I hope.